without any more ado, I'd like to invite Stephen up because he's going to be showing you images of the matrix of life, the energy of the molecule itself, which no one else was ever able to capture in real life. So please, big round of applause for Stephen.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the organizers for the invitation and the possibility of presenting this information. I'd like to start out with a little bit of a story, since most of what we investigate is always a matter of perspective. Aristotle, the great philosopher, was walking along the Mediterranean, and he saw in the distance a man running between the water and the shore. And as he came closer, he noticed that it was the town madman. And as Aristotle got virtually right up to the man, he said, "What are you doing?" The man was carrying a bucket, taking water from the Mediterranean and pouring it into a hole. So again, the philosopher said, "What are you doing?" And the man said, "I am going to empty all of the water from here so I can see the beautiful blue-green bottom." And Aristotle looks at him and says, "How are you going to get all of that water into this little hole?" And the man looked at him kind of puzzled and said, "Great philosopher, what are you doing today?" And Aristotle said, "I am contemplating the universe." And the man looked at him and said, "How are you going to get all of that in that little head of yours?" Everything is a matter of perspective. Now, Regina asked a good question about the nemoscope. I would like to know how many people in our audience here have heard of the Rife microscope, not Rife treatment devices, the Rife microscope. This is a very, very good percentage. I gave a lecture to the gynecological endoscopists in Miami, Florida, 1,800 medical doctors from 25 years old to 90, and not one doctor raised their hand. They had never heard of the Rife microscope. 2 years later, I give a presentation to the Dowsing Association, 300 people, 299 people raised their hand up. They had all heard of it, and the only two were waiters who were serving people at the time. Now, there is so much talk that goes on about Rife and the technology, and I want to kind of set a tone of where I am coming from. When I was a little kid in school, there was a game called telephone. And in this telephone, all the students in the class would line up, and the teacher would whisper into the ear of one of the students, "It is a beautiful day." And each student in turn would whisper into the next student's ear until it came out, and at the end it was, that is what I believe has been happening with a lot of the information having to do with Royal Rife. When I first obtained the Rife microscope in 1984, I was given 500 personal letters of all of the medical doctors who were with him, their work logs, the frequencies, newspaper articles. So I am sharing with you the information that comes directly or as directly from the source as possible, and not like the telephone game, which I have sat back in the last 30 years and watched people take from somebody's website to another website to another website and add all their stories. A story to really hone this in would be in 1986, 2 years after I obtained the microscope, I was at my office in Los Angeles and happened to take a call of a woman who said, "I heard what happened to the founders of your organization." Now, I am one of the founders, and I thought, really, what did you hear happen? The founders were gunned down in their front yard coming out of their home in the morning. I said, "Really?" They were gunned down. I said, how did you hear about this? Well, last weekend, I was at a rec room of a condo project, and they played the Orson Welles movie of Nikola Tesla. I'm sure a lot of people have seen it. It was great. After that movie, they closed the curtains, and we heard the story of Royal Rife and the Rife microscope, and the two founders who had possession of it, and they were shot dead on their steps. And the woman says to me, "Did you know them?" And I said, "Actually, I saw one of them in the mirror this morning." So, stories galore. I'm going to speak about the Rife microscope and the nemoscope. I want you to note when Royal Rife died. 1971. Now, I'd like to clarify, because in real life, I'm a very lighthearted, joking kind of guy, but in the program, it said, Stephen feels a lot of the Rife frequency devices are scams. Well, that's pretty strong, and I really have not said that, but what I have said is Royal Rife did not build or did not design any of the Rife frequency devices that are in existence today since he died in 1971. I am kind of a purist, and I believe we should go to the source and see original material rather than, again, copies. The Rife microscope was a light source microscope, which means that they could watch substances, microbes, bacteria, whatever they looked at, for unlimited amounts of time. On your screen is a dinner party from 1931. This is taken from the original photographs that we have in possession at our foundation. What were these men celebrating? Well, they were from the most prestigious universities: Arthur Kendall, Northwestern; E.C. Rosenau, Mayo Clinic; Lowell's Barker, Johns Hopkins. These men at the home of Milbank Johnson were celebrating the end of disease and illness. Now, that's a pretty heavy statement in 1931. Here is the article that appeared in the Los Angeles Times discussing this dinner party held at Milbank Johnson's home. So what did these individuals feel had been discovered? This Rife microscope, this 60,000 power device, was a light source microscope. Because of the unique principles that Rife had developed, counter-rotating Risley prisms, he was able to illuminate any microbe, virus, or bacteria in its true, inherent, natural vibration. Each specimen he looked at had its own unique color. Now, why is that important? And for a group that we have here who is very much technical, you will understand, but I do want to make the presentation also so the lay people in our audience will also understand it who may not be here. Color is a rate of frequency. It is a vibration. And once that these individuals who did the research saw that there was always a purplish ruby red color associated with a cancer tumor that they found, they had a basic idea of what the frequency was that was inherent in that particular virus. Now, Lee DeForest, the father of modern radio tubes, built a frequency generator the size of a wall. And what they would do is they would peer through this super microscope. It would take them sometimes 4 hours to focus, because in their writings, and again, I am not sharing from websites, these are their actual letters that they wrote back and forth to each other. They would sometimes focus for hours and realize it was a piece of dust that they had mistaken for a substance they were looking for. Then they would have to refocus again. Once they found that color, they would turn the frequency dial, and when they hit the mortal oscillatory rate, the exact frequency, the color would be gone, the microbe, virus, or bacteria was instantly destroyed. Now, how long did this take? Well, have you seen the example of when a singer sings and hits a particular note, a man or woman can break glass? It was basically the same with what they were saying in their notes. They would hit a frequency, one frequency, not for an hour. As soon as that frequency was hit, all of the microbes, viruses, or bacteria at that frequency would be devitalized or destroyed. Now, how could they test this out? They took a woman's breast cancer tumor, took it out of her body, cut it in half. One half, they went through their concoction where they could inject it into 100 albino rats. All 100 rats developed cancer from that cancer tumor. Then they took the frequency that they had discovered, they beamed that frequency at the rats, and all 100 rats were cured of the cancer. Now they took the other half of the tumor and they used the frequency on that part. Then they injected that in an additional 100 rats, and not one of the rats got cancer. As I'm talking and telling you this story, I want you to understand who we're talking about is the medical doctors. Mayo Clinic, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, USC School of Medicine, Northwestern University. Because if you go on something like Wikipedia, they have a nice little story about Rife that goes, he was a scientist who purported to have developed a microscope that people thought that they saw certain colors through. Well, it wasn't certain people, it was the best medical authorities in the United States at the time. Here we have Royal Rife, and this is a picture. Now, who was this incredible genius? He had to have been university trained, and he must have just been an amazing individual with a great background. Well, he was a chauffeur for a man named Timken in San Diego who made ball bearings for carriages. Now, there's a lot more to Rife, but that was his basic profession that people know about. And Timken, on his off time, said, what would you like to do? And Rife said, I have some ideas about microscopy. Okay, so Timken gives him and builds a $1 million laboratory in the early 1920s. If we have some people who are up on that, think of $1 million, what that would be the equivalent today. And Rife made all of the parts of this microscope. Having a microscope that is actually my hand, I don't know how famous it will become. The most important thing is this microscope, but this is the size of the barrel of that Rife microscope. As I'm presenting here, I have several purposes. One is to introduce what I consider the factual aspects, but I also want you to be aware of what these two men achieved. They achieved what was considered and is considered impossible. Because I have a very philosophical bent along with being a caretaker and librarian, and I believe that there is a very, very much stronger side to all of us if we have the understanding of what we are capable of doing and don't be blinded by other people's conceptions of what are our boundaries. Now, over the years, I've had many people come up to me and go, oh, the Rife microscope was a myth, there's no such thing. I'm going, really? Now, I actually had the microscope and had people look at me face to face and go, it's a wives' tale. Well, this is an article in the Los Angeles Times, The Wonder Work of 1931, with Royal Rife and Arthur Kendall of Northwestern University. This is one of my favorite articles. We have the original article at our World Research. This is Lewells Barker of Johns Hopkins. Now, what this article says is, Barker had just come from Royal Rife and viewing the microscope. And Barker says, Rife said, all the scientists are saying that he is breaking all the rules of optics. So Louis Barker says, they're going to have to get some new laws then, because if they're saying he's breaking them and he's doing it, then their laws don't mean anything. Was the microscope real? This is the internal staff minutes of the Mayo Clinic in 1932, talking about how they discovered the elements of the poliomyelitis virus on the Rife microscope. So this thing with the wives' tale and it didn't exist doesn't really hold water. This is the cover, and I know you can't read it. I personally don't like just reading things to audiences. I just want to have these as a backdrop. The first paragraph says, it is a very commendable achievement by Royal Rife that for many years he has far surpassed the theoretical limitations of a light beam and microscopes. How do you surpass a limitation? Their words don't even make any sense. A limitation is a limitation. The Smithsonian here, in the last paragraph of this article, says, under the universal microscope, disease organisms such as staph, leprosy, hoof and mouth may be observed to succumb when exposed to certain lethal frequencies. Those frequencies are inherent in the actual element. Now, how did Rife achieve finding what is considered impossible? He did something called heterodyning of light. Most people think of heterodyning sound. You have one sound, you add another sound, you create a third sound. Royal Rife in the 20s did this with a light source that opened up a whole vibrational field that could not be seen under normal microscopes. This is the Smithsonian Institute report of 1944. That is supposed to be the ethical publishing arm of the United States government. Having Rife's original book of formulations, and again, here is something else. I have seen so many websites with all of their theories, with numbers that they've come up with, and oh yes, most of the physicists that have come to me said, I'm smarter than Rife. I said, oh, okay, why is that? Well, he did this and he did that, and he ran his frequencies through a gas tube, but I've eliminated all that, and I now have my frequency devices, and they're all great. And I asked this very simple question from any of the audience, and if you've got information, did any of your sources ever have the original microscope? Did they ever see the original lab notes of the frequencies? Because if they haven't, the question is, where are people pulling all these things from? I have been vocal in my comments about some of the Rife equipment because people will come up to me and go, I have this Rife machine and I want to know, and it's really fantastic. And I ask them a very simple question. Has your machine been validated? Because these scientists really spent a lot of time, when you read their letters, when you look at their test results, to discover the frequencies and the work they were doing. But I hear back, Steve, we haven't tested it because you know the FDA would be all over us. I said, look, show me a bona fide examination of a person before using your Rife machine. Show me an examination after. Cross out the doctor's name, cross out the patient's name. I just want to see a real scientific evaluation. And by the way, did your test subjects change their diet? Are they meditating now? Are they doing yoga? Because if they are, how do you know whether it's your Rife machine or it is their change of lifestyle? Now, why am I adamant about this? And you'll understand now. because people who have used Reif's name have now screwed it up in many places all over the country. They have that, the Reif machine is banned in certain areas because the people who built this and stole his name got in trouble with the authorities, so we can't even come out with the real machine because his name is banned. So if you feel a little animosity for me as a caretaker, that is very upsetting because it isn't Reif's original material. 60 diseases and illnesses we have the specific frequencies for, and out of his lab, he did many things. This is spinal meningitis. They found the thermal death point for various elements, microbes, viruses, and bacteria. Why is this such a danger? What happened to this Reif microscope that showed so much potential? Well, one thing is this letter that I found in my group of letters, and this is from November 4th, 1936. Reif and his group in San Diego, California, one day, something happened with their frequency machine. And in this particular letter, I'm going to paraphrase it, but this is what they said. One day we hit an oscillatory rate that destroyed every experiment in our entire laboratory. Every test animal stayed healthy, but every virus, microbe, everything we worked with was instantaneously destroyed. One band of frequencies. The only evidence we have is they said additionally, the mold melted off of the leather chairs and a particular shaped window in the bathroom in the house in San Diego broke. So I got some pretty wise people here. So that's your clue. Should be pretty easy, right? Something that melts the mold, breaks one form of window, and that one frequency destroyed all of their experiments. Did they report that in any of their notes? No, unfortunately they did not. Why is it dangerous? Because they also were able to do and prove a concept called pleomorphism. Pleomorphism is basically a mutation of one form or substance into another. So they were able to take a Bacillus coli in the colon, and by applying frequency, they were able to convert it into a typhus element. Now, I want you to realize what we're saying and why this is so important. Because you are not always obviously invaded from something outside that jumped into your body or that you caught. We have all of these elements. We have all of these microbes. We have all of these viruses residing in us all the time. But when the environment or the element has changed, then there is a mutation that takes place. Now, they tried to report this. That was Arthur Kendall at a big bacteriology conference, and he was booed down. He was told to shut up. The letters were that I read about the incident were really tragic because that's impossible. In fact, in my German office, they have a saying. It must not be because it cannot be. In other words, even if they see something, they really didn't see it because it's impossible and it can't really happen, therefore I really didn't see it. It's very convoluted, but that's how a lot of our science is. It really can't happen. It's got to be a myth. Royal Reif was a low-key individual who was so shy that he had to be told by the other doctors in his group, try to look these people in the eye and carry on an intelligent conversation because he didn't want to leave his microscope. If he did, he was racing motorboats, he was playing music. That's the typical pose in the 40s and 50s, as you can see. He was brilliant. One important message I want to be sharing with you all is the aspect that no laws are really ever broken when you have new discoveries. It is an old Hermetic philosophical principle that you use higher laws to supersede lower laws. And now, for the real entertainment portion of my presentation, I want to demonstrate this principle of law. I have a regular piece of paper here, folded in half with a paper clip. So I want everybody to be careful because I'm launching this into the audience now. So okay, I'm going to keep trying. Oop. That's pretty good. There's a piece of paper. There's a paper clip. Thank you. I need this for the next lecture. Here is a piece of paper. I have the same paper clip. Are you guys ready? Bring it on. I love that. Okay, so when I practiced 50 times, it always went straight. But, sorry. I'm going to do it one more time in case that was just a fluke. Bending to the right. I wish there was some award or prize, but that's not in the budget. Okay, so what did I do? There was a certain law with that paper and a paper clip. I didn't break a law. I used a higher law to supersede another law. That is what it's all about. Sometimes people are looking so much to broaden, to enlarge, to go beyond something that other people have done without realizing that, no, go up to a higher plane. Think way out of the box. Often I hear people talk about, yeah, I'm going out of the box. They're not out of the box. They're still in that basic box. Especially here with the brilliant minds. Think of this example. Just really recognize you have other laws that are around. Royal Rife obtained 60,000 magnification. That was 10 times more powerful than anything that was in existence at the time, and in reality is still even greater than the research microscopes that are in use today. And I'm going to be showing you some examples and pictures through the electron microscope, and you're going to see the difference of what you can really see through that type of instrument. First of all, the electron microscope, you put it in a vacuum, the substance, you bombard it by electrons, and the substance is destroyed. You cannot look at anything live. Rife was able to look at substances live for as many hours as he chose, 60,000. But now here we have Elmer Nemus, 1950s. He builds a microscope that can magnify in diameters 3.5 million. Elmer Nemus was a surgeon, and he builds what looks like a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, but it isn't. And he did something very, very similar to Rife. He had a theory that if you cause a radiation in a substance, it will broadcast out its inherent frequency. You can turn that into light and then project it onto a screen or through a TV. He was able to achieve 3.5 million magnification, but he didn't do it by any kind of focal length. Now, this is very odd. Most of you may not know how microscopy works, but it has to do usually with the light beam and what is possible. He did not work on focal length. He used emissions that he developed around the neutron, below the neutron level, bombarded the substances, and was able to penetrate the outer shell all the way down to the atomic level. Now, this is a picture taken through an electron microscope at 63,000 magnification, and all you can see is black and white images. This is a picture through the nemoscope of latex. This is a piece of latex. This is a piece of latex. Now, what are you looking for or at? I've had physicists, until they really realize what this is, you are looking at the energy fields around the atomic structures in this substance. This is the polio virus at 63,000 magnification. This is the polio virus through the nemoscope. This is an electron microscope. This is the nemoscope. I went on the internet not too long ago and someone asked the question, has anyone seen a picture of an atom? And you get all these comments. People go, yeah, there was a picture of an atom, but it was a computer rendering that was made, on Photoshop. We have the original of this picture. What you are looking at is the atomic structure and the energy bonds. And I don't see really a pointer up here, but you're looking at the energy bonds between the atoms. I'm just going to leave it here for a minute or two so you can absorb what you're really looking at, because no eyes have really seen the energy connecting the atomic structures. And they did not have the computer Photoshop when this was done in 1952, and having the original and their work information, we're very sure of this. The second picture shows as the substance is removed from its source, you are looking at the decay that takes place in the structure as the energy field is dissipating. This is an iron nuclide. This is a cancer virus at 3.5 million magnification. And to my knowledge, there aren't any other pictures, since there's a lot of debate. What causes cancer? Is it a virus? What is it? This was taken 1952 in the plasma. This was in the urine of a known cancer victim, and it's interesting that it looks very much like a crab, cancer crab. Now, I'm going to go back again because it's not right and it's difficult in an audience, but again, I'm going to start back here. You don't need to prove to energetic practitioners that there's an energy. Some of the scientific type who question it, they're the ones that go, no, this can't really be true, and you're doing this, you're doing Reiki, or you're doing acupuncture, and there's no energy, and how do we know? You are looking at the energy bonds. You are looking at the decay of the energy field and how the integrity of the structures become lost. This may be a difficult picture at first to understand, but you are looking at the magnetic flux lines next to a magnet. you are looking at this north and south pole pulls around a magnet. No human eye has ever seen that. Again, we look and we go, how is this possible? And we're talking the 1950s. This Elmer Nemes was one smart guy. He did not write everything about how he obtained this, but there was no question, again, having his original, there was only one record left of all these pictures. Now, I had decided if I did a whole presentation on Rife's life or Nemes's life, I make 2 hours talks on that, so I chose not to go into great depth. But what happened to Nemes and what happened to this microscope? Well, Nemes had it in a Photoshop in a place called Studio City, California, to repair part of it, and somebody broke in and it was stolen and never appeared again. That was it. That was the end. This was 1957. A few years after that, Nemes was killed in a barroom brawl, and that is why only 2 people or 3 people raised their hand that they had ever heard of the Nemescope, because everything disappeared. The only reason that there is any pictures is a woman named Betty Lee Morales, who started the Cancer Control Society, who was an ex-CIA agent, who knew Dr. Nemes and helped him with these pictures, had his presentation book off the premises, away from the Studio City camera shop, or we would not even have any more records of this. This is the original book that we have of Rife's frequencies, the actual frequencies that he and his group had. Now, what happened with the Rife microscope? I showed you in original pictures of the men at the dinner party celebrating the end of disease and illness, and within 6 years of that picture, all the doctors in that photograph, all of them but 4, claimed that they didn't know anything about a cancer cure. They didn't know anything about Royal Rife, that they never had any information about him. How do I know this? Because of the various letters of Rife writing to his remaining doctors supporting him, going, whoa, what has happened here? All of a sudden, we're abandoned by all of these medical doctors. Now, was it because they discovered it was a farce? No. Did they discover that they were just being flim-flammed, that the pictures and the visuals they saw were made up? No, because there's never been a negative article that said that the Rife microscope was a fake. It's as if it just disappeared. This is one great advantage of the internet now, because if the internet was around during Rife's time, 10 million people would have known what he was doing. Because there is a big difference between Royal Rife and Elmer Nemes. Rife found the frequencies, then they used them on patients. They took 16 terminal cancer patients to the Mary Ellen Scripps Ranch in La Jolla, California, and within 30 days, all were deemed clinically cured of cancer. How do we know this? Because of their letters. And by the way, their letters, I'm going to reveal a little bit about myself. I have been collecting information. I've been doing this 40 years. Our foundation has 30,000 books dating to the 1400s in all the different specialties, everything we can identify. When I read through those 500 letters, I cried. Because when I think of all the people who have died and are dying of cancer, and these people supposedly had an answer. I'm going to be very conservative. They supposedly had an answer using frequency. And how many people have died? He was abandoned. It's too many. He was abandoned because the other doctors were basically threatened. The AMA and Morris Fishbein wrote a letter to Rife saying, we will tell all the other doctors if you give us a piece of the action. The AMA wanted a piece of the action of every Rife microscope that was made, and they didn't even inform any other doctors that it existed. That's greed. That's just to show that is actually me there in a very relaxed state. And the history of Rife is really phenomenal. And I just hope that anybody who's really interested makes an effort to really understand what was involved and what they were doing. This is the NEMIS presentation book. As I said, there's just one book, thankfully, that we have. Now, what about duplicating these? Of course it's possible. Emerson said, when I find narrow viewpoints, I find narrow reading. If something is not in your realm of thought, then you don't even go there. You don't even think about it. We need to constantly be broadening our thoughts of where we want to go. All of these things are great that I've heard. The energies are great. It's very important. But just think of having the right tools where you can really be examining what is going on in much deeper levels than just the visual. This isn't really rocket science here, that everything in the universe vibrates and is in energetic motion. When I hear the term energy medicine, what isn't energy? What really isn't medicine? Energy medicine, when I first started, I always thought of it as just color and sound and music, but it is so much more broad than that. What to me is emerging breakthrough energy are spiritual selves. The real breakthrough energy is not some of the things that I've heard. It is who we are, and as we break through and understand who we are, and that energy resides completely around all forms, that will be the big breakthrough. I speeded through a little bit here because I do want to get into the philosophical. I think the philosophical that I'm just getting into is very important. Anything that has been created outwardly exists inwardly. The old Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, as below, so above, is so profound. Everything I showed you here is possible to be duplicated by us. By us. Anything that exists. Paracelsus said in the 1500s, every star that exists in the cosmos has a foci point within us. Every plant in the field has a foci point within us. Every sound that is generated in the universe has a corresponding point within us. I heard a couple of the other speakers, the speaker before the last one, really talk about energy and spirit, and I want to reiterate that. I will share, I normally don't at conferences, but I think it's important that I share with you. How did I find these? How did I get the Rife microscope or the nemoscope? Through dreams. I had dreams at night of telephone numbers and places to go in the world. What's my background? I have an advanced degree in business. I'm math, science. I went through school on athletic scholarships. I eat jelly beans. I'm just a regular kind of guy, have a great relationship, but I had dreams. All of us are capable of so much more. And so, yes, I've shown you mechanical things, I've showed you physical, but I always feel a little remiss if I don't point out to everybody who we are and what we're capable of. Those two gentlemen, and my silly little example here of the plane, they transcended the barriers of thoughts that they had been locked into. I heard a gentleman a little while ago talking, and he had some good points, but the vehemence was just so strong. I personally had to leave the tent, even though I agreed with probably everything he said, because that really, that's his way, and that's fine. I just believe that we are capable, when we put ourselves in an open space, of achieving everything and anything. Our World Research Library contains individuals who have transcended their particular spot, men, women, and attained something great. I gave a talk about 3 years ago at a place called the Creative Life Center in Sedona. And I don't use notes in any of my lectures, so it wasn't too terrible for me, but the night before my talk, I had the following dream. So if you're with me this long, I'm going to share this dream. I was walking along the ocean, and with me were all the people of the world. And ahead of me was a beautiful woman in blue. And she had a microphone, but I couldn't hear because right next to her was the horseshoe stand. And in this horseshoe stand were all the self-help people, all the books, all the courses, how to achieve enlightenment, blah, blah, blah. And there was so much pollution coming from out of the stands, I could barely see this woman, and I could not hear her. And as I came close, I realized it was the goddess of wisdom, Sophia. And I thought in my mind, if all of these teachers and gurus are causing this pollution or blocking of the complete truth, what is the answer? How do we get from where we are to a more enlightened state? And a wind blew off the ocean, and it cleared all of the fog and smoke away. And I heard the following words: all it takes to achieve greater discoveries and learning about your true self is a beautiful heart, an open mind, and a humble spirit. So I will challenge everybody in the audience. You don't have the courses, you don't have to go here. Can you achieve that beautiful heart, the open mind, and the humble spirit? And you will download whatever needs to come and the enlightenment that will move this planet further, because it doesn't come from the vehemence, it comes from our shining bright. And just like our scientists illuminated the inner nature of these organisms, this is what is in store for us. I thank you and appreciate the time that you've given me.